The cosmic circulation of aerial waters described is not peculiar to Indo-Iranian mythology. Dr. Warren, in his Paradise Found, states that a similar circulation of aerial waters is mentioned in the works of Homer. Homer describes the sun as returning to the flowing of the ocean or sinking into it, and again rising from it and mounting the sky. All rivers and every sea and all fountains and even deep wells are again said to arise from the deep flowing ocean, which is believed to encircle the earth. Helios, or the sun, is further described as sailing from west to east in a golden boat or cup, evidently meaning that the underworld was supposed to be full of water. But Homeric scholars seem to have raised unnecessary difficulties in the proper interpretation of these passages by assuming that Homer conceived the earth to be flat, and that as Hades was a region of complete darkness, the sun couldn't be said to go there even after setting. Dr. Warren has, however, shown that the assumption is entirely groundless and that Homer's earth was really a sphere. The underworld was full of aerial waters. We've seen above how some Vedic scholars have raised similar difficulties in the interpretation of the Vitra myth by supposing that the lower celestial hemisphere was unknown to Vedic bards. This is probably a reflection of the Homeric controversy, but as pointed out by Dr. Warren, these baseless assumptions are a clue mainly to a prejudice with which many scholars approach the question of the interpretation of ancient myths. It's assumed that early man couldn't possibly have known anything about the world beyond what the rudest savages know at present. Plain and explicit statements are sometimes put aside, distorted, or ignored by scholars who, had they not been blinded by prejudice, would certainly have interpreted them in a different way. It's impossible to do justice to the subject in this place, and for further details, see Dr. Warren's instructive work on the subject. Dr. Warren also states that Euripides, like Homer, held the view there was one fountain of all world's water. The same conception is expressed by Hesiod in his Theogony, where all rivers as sons and all fountains and brooks as daughters are traced back to Oceanus. When we have a constant descending movement of all waters until they reach the world surrounding ocean river at the equator, beyond which is the underworld, similar to the movements of aerial waters described in the Avesta. Aristotle, in his Meteors, is also said to have mentioned a river in the air constantly flowing betwixt the heaven and the earth, and made by the ascending and descending vapors. This again pointed by Grill that the ancient Germans had a similar world river, and the descending Uka stream and the ascending Animus stream of the Finnish mythology, similarly believed to also be traces of like cosmic water circulation. There is also the Golden Boat in Lettish mythology, and Professor Max Mueller, referring to it, says, "What the Golden Boat is, that sinks into the sea and is mourned for by the daughter of the sky, however doubtful it may be elsewhere, is not to be mistaken in the mythology of the Letts. It is the setting sun, which in the Veda has to be saved by the Ashvins. It is the golden boat in which Helios and Heracles sail from west to east. Sometimes it is the sun daughter herself that is drowned like Chaivana in the Vedas, and as Chaivana and similar heroes had to be saved in the Vedas by the Ashvins, the Letts also call upon the godsons to row the boat and save the sun daughter." In connection with this, it may be here observed that the Ashvins are described in the Rig Veda as saving their prodigies in boats, and that although the Ashvins' boats are not described as golden, their chariot is said to be golden, while the boats of Pushan, in which he crosses the aerial ocean, are actually said to be golden. The Ashvins are again spoken of as having both chariot and a boat, sort of double equipment, and their chariot is said to be traversing, without distinction, both the heaven and the watery regions. The word traversing is meaningless unless there is some difficulty in traversing over one part of the celestial spheres distinguished from the other. The Vedic gods used these boats especially in crossing the lower world, the home and seat of aerial waters, and when they appeared above the horizon, they are described as traversing the upper sphere by means of their chariots. But sometimes the waters are said to carry them even across the sky above, just as the chariot described as going over the lower world. For instance, In the legend of Durgatamas, discussed previously, he is said to be born on waters for 10 months and then, growing old, was about to die or reach the ocean to which the waters were speeding. In other words, this means that the son, who was born on the water for 10 months, was about to go into the lower watery regions, as explained earlier. But to proceed on the subject at hand, the idea of the cosmic circulation of aerial waters is not confined to the Indian, Iranian, or Greek mythology. In Egyptian mythology, Nut, the goddess of the sky, is sometimes represented by a figure in which a band of stars is accompanied by a band of water. Sir Norman Lockyer tells us that not only the sun gods but the stars were also supposed to travel in boats across the firmament from one horizon to the other. The Jewish idea of a firmament in the midst of waters, the waters above being afterwards separated from waters below the firmament, is already referred to. There is, therefore, nothing strange or surprising if we find in the Vedas and in the Avesta more or less clear references to the circulation of aerial waters through the upper and lower celestial hemispheres of the universe. It's an idea which is found in ancient mythology of every other nation. Nothing but false prejudice can deter us from interpreting the simultaneous movements or liberation of water and light, described in Vedic hymns, on the theory of the cosmic circulation of aerial waters. But even after accepting the theory of cosmic circulation of celestial waters, simultaneous release of water and dawn, it may be asked how the Arctic theory comes in, or is in any way required, to explain the Vitra legend. We may admit that the waters imprisoned by Vitra by shutting up the passages through the rocky walls that surround them may be taken to mean the celestial waters in the world below the three earths. But still, the struggle between Indra and Vitra may, for all we know, represent the daily fight between light and darkness, and may be urged, there's no necessity whatever, for bringing in the Arctic theory to explain the legend. A little reflection will, however, show that the incidents in this legend cannot be explained on the theory of a daily struggle between light and darkness. The Angiras, who are the assistants of Indra in his conquest of the cows, are said to have defeated Vala at the end of the year. This shows the struggle was annual and did not take place every day. We have a passage where Arbuda, the watery demon, is said to have been killed by Indra with ice, and not with a thunderbolt as usual. In addition to the fact that the struggle was a yearly one, we must therefore hold that the conflict took place in the winter season of ice and snow, and is corroborated by the statement in the Avesta that it was during winter that the waters, with them the sun, ceased to move onwards. Vitra's forts are again described as autumnal, showing the fight must have commenced at the end of autumn and continued during winter. We have further seen that there are 100 night sacrifices, and the duration of Tishtriya's fight with Apwasha is described as varying from 1 to 100 nights in the Tir Yasht. All these incidents can be explained only by Arctic theory, or by the theory of the long autumnal night, and not in the hypothesis of a daily struggle of light and darkness. Thus we have the conclusion that Indra's fight with Vitra must have commenced in fall and lasted till the end of Shishira in the watery regions of the netherworld. Fortunately for us, this conclusion is remarkably borne out by an important passage preserved in Rig Veda, which gives us what may be called the very date of the commencement of Indra's conflict with Vitra, though the true bearing of the passage as yet remain unexplained owing to the absence of the real key as to its meaning. We can read, Indra found Shambhara dwelling on the mountains in Shatvarishayam Shradi. Now, the first word is an ordinal numeral in the feminine gender and in a locative case, and similarly, Sharhadi is a locative of Sharad or autumn, which also is a word of feminine gender in Sanskrit. The phrase is therefore capable of two interpretations or constructions, though the words are simple in themselves. The first literally means in the 40th, and the other in autumn. Now, if we take it as an adjective qualifying autumn, the meaning of the phrase would be in the 40th autumn, while if two words are taken separately, the meaning would be on the 40th in autumn. Sayana and Western scholars adopted the first conclusion and understand the passage to mean Indra found Shambhara dwelling on the mountains in the 40th autumn, that is, the 40th year. For the words indicating seasons like spring, autumn, and winter are understood to denote a year, especially when used in a numeral adjective meaning more than one. The construction is grammatically correct, both being the feminine gender and the locative case. The two words can be taken together and understood to mean in the 40th autumn or year. But what are we to understand by the statement that Shambhara was found in the 40th year by Indra? That Indra was engaged in searching out the demon for 40 years, and it was only at the end of this long period the enemy was at last found dwelling in the mountains? If so, Indra's conflict with Shambhara cannot be daily or yearly, and must have supposed to have taken place only once in 40 years, an inference which is directly opposed by the statement that Vala was killed at the end of the year. Some scholars try to get out of the difficulty by suggesting the passage must be taken as referring to famine or drought that occurs after 40 years, or that it may represent a 40 years war between the Aryans protected by Indra and Shambhara, chief of the aboriginal races dwelling in the mountains. But both of the explanations are too far-fetched and imaginary to deserve any serious attention or refutation. The story of Shambhara is mentioned in a number of places in Rig Veda, and everywhere it represents Indra conflict with Vitra. It is therefore preposterous to hold that 40 years' war with the Aborigines is referred to in this single passage, especially when the passage is capable of being interpreted differently without straining the words used. It's the most ordinary Sanskrit idiom to use in locative case in mentioning a month, a day, and a season or a year when the particular incident is said to have taken place. Thus, even now we say, in the month of Karkiti, in the bright half, on the 13th day. Feminine ordinal numerals are always used without any noun to denote the tithi, or day of the month, or the fortnight, as the case may be. Thus, in Tatriya Brahmana, we have the expression shown above, meaning that if the sacrificial fire is not consecrated by the end of the year, it should be consecrated on the 12th afterwards. Here, the feminine ordinal of the locative used by itself means on the 12th day after the end of the year mentioned in the preceding sentence. The Vedic passage under discussion may similarly be taken to denote the 40th day and Shadi, the season of the year. The two words being taken as independent locatives, the passage would then mean Indra found Shambhara dwelling on the mountains on the 40th day in autumn. Now, Sharad is the 4th season of the year, and the 40th day of Sharad would mean 7 months and 10 days, or 220 days after the first day of Vashanta, or spring, which commenced the year in olden times. In short, the passage means Indra's fight with Shambhara, the annual conflict between light and darkness, commenced on the 10th day of the 8th month a year, or 10th of October if we take the year to have then commenced with March, first month of the old Roman calendar. Vishnu, like a rounded wheel, is said to have set in motion his 90 racing steeds together with the 4. It's a reference evidently to the year of 4 seasons of 90 days each. If we accept this division, each season would be 3 months duration, and Sharad, being the 3rd, 40th day of Starad would still mean the 10th day of the 8th month a year. The passage thus gives us the very date of Indra's annual fight with Vitra. If it had been correctly understood, much useless speculation of the nature of Vitra's legend could have been avoided. We have seen previously the 7 Adyatas, or sun god, the sons of Aditi, were presented by her to the gods in former Yuga, and that she cast away the 8th, Martanda, because he was born in an undeveloped state. In other words, the sun god of the 8th month is here said to have died soon after he was born, evidently meaning that the sun went below the horizon at the beginning of the 8th month, and by fixing the date of the commencement of Indra's fight with Vitra as the 40th day of Sharad, or the 10th day of the 8th month, we arrive also at the same conclusion. The legend of Didi and the date of the commencement of Indra's fight with Shambhara, as shown, thus corroborate each other in a remarkable way, and as the current interpretation of the passage does not yield any intelligible sense, there's no course left for us but to accept the only other possible interpretation. According to this interpretation, Sharad becomes the last season of sunshine, and it may be here remarked that the etymological meaning of the word further supports the same view, for Sharad is derived from shiri, to wither or waste away. The word thus primarily signifies the season of decay or withering. The decay here not is being referred to as the decay of the power of the sun, not the withering of the grass, as suggested by Sayana in his commentary. Thus we find in the Tatriya Samhita there are 3 lusters or powers of the sun, one in Vasanta, that is, in the morning, one in Grishma, or the midday, and one in Sharad, the evening. You cannot suppose these words, morning, midday, and evening, are here used in their primary sense. The 3 stages of the day represented by them are predicated of the yearly sun, and Sharad is said to be before evening, the time of the decline of his yearly course. It follows, therefore, that after Sharad there was no period of sunshine in ancient times, and a Vedic passage quoted by Shabara in his commentary says, "The sun is all seasons. When it is morning, it is Vasanta. When the milking time, it is Grishma. When midday, it is Varsha. When evening, it is Sharad. And when it sets, it is the dual season of Hemanta and Shishira." If the passage has any meaning, it shows the powers of the sun declined in Sharad, at the end of Sharad, autumn, therefore represented as annual, succumbing to the powers of darkness, or in short, the dual season of Hemanta and Shishra represented the long night when the sun went below the horizon. It may also be mentioned that the word himya, wintry, is used in Rig Veda for night, implying that the wintry season was the season of special darkness. It may be urged that we have no authority for holding that in ancient days time was reckoned simply by seasons and days, and therefore the phrase shown cannot be interpreted to mean on the 40th day in Sharad. The objection is not, however, well founded, for in ancient inscriptions we found many instances where dates of events are recorded only by reference to season. Thus, in the book Inscriptions from Cave Temples of Western India, published from the government of Bombay in 1881, the date of inscription number 14 is given as follows: "Of King Vasithiputa, the illustrious lord, in the year 7th of Grishma, of the 5th fortnight and the 1st day." Upon this, Dr. Burgess remarks that the mention of the 5th fortnight of Grishma shows the year was not divided into 6 seasons, but into 3, namely Grishma, Varsha, and Hemnata. It is important for our purposes. The inscription is a method giving the date by seasons, fortnights, and days, with no reference to the month. The inscription is followed in the same book by others, one of which is thus dated: "The 24th year of King Vashputa, the illustrious Pumali, on the 3rd fortnight of the winter months, on the 2nd day." Another is said to be inscribed: "And the 10th day and the 6th fortnight of Grishma, in the 8th year of King Madhariputa, Lord Shri Sesna." Dr. Bhandakar, in his early history of the Deccan, has ascertained that Madhariputa reigned in the Mahashastra from about 190 to 197 CE, and Pulimaya was on the throne of Maharashtra about 60 years earlier, that is, about 130 to 154 CE. All inscriptions noted above therefore belong to the 2nd century of the Christian era, that is, a long time before the date of Aryabhata or Varahamirha, whose work seemed to have been so established, if not introducing the present system of measuring time by seasons, months, fortnights, and days. It's therefore clear that 1800 years ago, dates and events were recorded and ascertained by mention only the season, the fortnight, and the day of the fortnight, with no reference to the month of the year, and we may very well suppose that several centuries before this period the dates might have been given in still more simple a method, namely by mentioning only the season and the day of the season. That is, as a matter of fact, we do find this method of measuring time, such as by seasons and days, adopted in the Avesta to mark particular days of the year. Thus, as written in some manuscripts mentioned by Westergaard in his notes on the Avragan, there is a statement of different rewards to which the Mazda Yansian receives the next life, for which he gives a present in this to the Ratu, the religious head. We have therein such expressions as, here each date is given in two different ways. First, by mentioning the Gahan-navar, or the season, year being divided into 6 Gahan-navars, the day of the season, and secondly, by mentioning the month and day of the month. Strictly speaking, there is no necessity to adopt this double method for marking the days of the year, for either of them is enough to accurately define the day required. It's therefore, as remarked by Mr. Nader Shah, that the method of counting by seasons and days is older of the two, and the phrases containing the names of the month and days, later interpolations made at a time, the older method is superseded by the latter. But even supposing that the double phrases were used originally, we can, so far as our present purpose is concerned, safely infer from these passages that the method of marking the days of the year by mentioning the season and the day thereof was in vogue at the time when Afrigan was written. If the method is so old, it fully warrants us in interpreting the phrase shown above to mean on the 40th day of Sharad, or autumn. Be little doubt the Vedic bards recorded in this passage the exact date of the commencement of Indra's fight with Shambhara. With the absence of a true key to this meaning, the passage is long, unfortunately, misunderstood and misinterpreted by Eastern and Western scholars. The grammatical possibility of connecting the word shown as an adjective with Sharhadi helped in the misconception, and though Vedic scholars were unable to explain why Shambhara, according to their interpretation, should be described as being found in the 40th year, they seem to have accepted the interpretation because no other meaning appeared possible to them. The alternative construction proposed above is very simple. Instead of taking that as an adjective qualifying Sharadi, you take the two words as independent locatives. The change in meaning caused thereby is very striking and important, and so long as the Arctic theory was unknown, the attention of scholars was not likely to be drawn to this alternative construction. But now we can very well understand why Indra is said to have found Shambhara on the 40th day of Sharad, and why the forts which gave shelter to the demon are described as Sharhadi, as well as why Arbuda, or the watery demon, is said to have been killed by ice. It has been stated that the forts of Shambhara must be understood to mean days, and the adjective Sharhadi only serves to strengthen the same view. The disappearance of the sun below the horizon in the beginning of the 8th month of autumn, followed by a long twilight, continuous dark night of about 100 days, and a long dawn of 30 days in the Arctic regions, is the basis of the legend, and every incident therein can be naturally and intelligibly explained only by this theory.